to order at 7:00 p.m. Mr. Roberts, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Present.
Mr. Butler?
Here.
Mr. George?
Here.
Mr. Kruger? Ms. Talley?
Here. Now, will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda this evening?
We do not.
Great. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second. You got it.
That was
I'll
Ms.
second.
Barnes.
Barnes?
Mr. Roberts?
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
The motion is carried 4-0. Next, we will have our presentations. I call up Mr. Craig L. I'm not even going to attempt it. And Miss Ashley Locker. Oh, Melissa? Alyssa.
It's fine.
I'm sorry.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Hunt, Treasurer Roberts, colleagues, and invited guests. Welcome. My name is Craig Lautenschlager, Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning, and I'm here with
Alyssa Locker.
she's our instructional coach. And tonight we wanted to just briefly give you an overview of structured literacy and how that looks in the elementary grades. We worked with our two elementary principals, Mr. Lawlathan and Mrs. Cobb, but we just wanted to present a big picture and then answer any questions you might have about what that literacy shift looks like. So a structured literacy classroom consists of explicit and systematic teaching of foundational skills, vocabulary, comprehension, and writing. So put another way, you'll see more I do, we do, and you do in a structured literacy type classroom than in a whole class instruction approach. So our instructional coach, Mrs. Alyssa Locker, will provide you with a deeper look of how it unfolds in the classroom with students in just a little bit. What's on your screen right now is Ohio's dyslexia law. And so we'll start with that piece because the reality is that Canal Winchester has been doing a structured literacy instruction long before it was part of the Ohio dyslexia law, which is on the screen now. And in fact, the 133rd Ohio General Assembly passed legislation concerning the screening of and intervention for children with dyslexia. And as a part of our presentation tonight, we will highlight the teacher PD we've done over the years. We'll talk about the dyslexia screening that will start next month for our third grade students. And then we'll talk about our letters training that we've been doing for years. And the acronym LETTERS stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. I put this slide together just because in the news, you might be hearing a lot about the science of reading and dyslexia. It's been a hot topic for our governor to speak on. So we're going to address each of these terms, how they relate to each other, and how we're addressing it here in Canal Winchester. I will let Alyssa do a little deeper dive of structured literacy.
Sure. This table is just a simplified version of all of the different components of structured literacy in the classroom. On the left side, you can see it talks about what is taught. Structured literacy follows a speech to print. So our students learn language and comprehension starting at the speaking level, and then that works down to the print. So it starts with phonology and phonemic awareness, which is just the instruction of understanding sounds, whether that's at the word, syllable, or individual letter phoneme level. Sound symbol association, which is basic phonics. So understanding that literacy comes from letters making a certain sound, and then there being patterns for spelling. Syllable instruction, which is really what helps our students decode those multi-syllabic words when they get a little bit older. Morphology, which is the study of meaning within a word. So that could be a prefix, a root, and a suffix. And then syntax and semantics, which just has to do with the structure that our language takes on and the meaning related to structure too. Structured literacy is taught in a systematic, cumulative, explicit, and diagnostic way. So what that means is there's a specific scope and sequence that we should be following that builds. That's what makes it cumulative. And it's explicit. So we don't assume that our students are coming to us with any kind of knowledge. We give them what they need to be successful, which is where the diagnostic portion really comes into play. So we're going to give them a diagnostic so we can see where the gaps are so that we can better fill and meet our students' needs. These are my nerdy favorites. These are two theoretical models for structured literacy. The top one is called Scarborough's reading rope, and you'll see it's divided into two different colors. The bottom is word recognition, which is in blue, and that really is what we're doing more at the primary levels. At the K2, we're really focused on decoding, our students building that sight fluency, and also that phonological awareness, which helps them break down the words. And then the top of the reading rope is language comprehension. So once our kids can decode words, do they understand what they've decoded? Can they apply it and get deeper meaning from it? And that requires instruction in those things, which is literacy knowledge, verbal reasoning, structure of language, which is really grammar, vocabulary, and then also making sure our students have background knowledge to connect what they're reading about to. Those two come together to make skilled reading. So you can't have one without the other. And then the bottom, that equation there is called the simple view of reading. And I think the more important thing to focus is that it is a multiplication fact. So a deficit in either area is going to lead to incomplete reading comprehension. So both have equal weight and both are really important.
This graphic here shows you that this has been a 4-year journey we've been on. Back in 2020, we trained Alyssa in all of this instruction so that in 2021-22, she could give that letters training to the grade 2 teachers and intervention teachers. Last year was our largest cohort of teachers that we trained with letters. Kindergarten, first, third, intervention, and our title teachers we trained. And then this current year, we're training our gifted English language arts teachers, any new teachers in grades K through 3, 4, 5, and middle school intervention teachers. So we just wanted you to see that this shift has been going on for years.
These are some snapshots of structured literacy in action. So this first slide comes from a first grade classroom. And what I really want to point out here is how engaged our students are in the photos. In that first photo on the left, you can see they have their little hands up. The teacher's instructing them on a specific phonics pattern, and they're tapping out the individual sounds in the words. So they all have their little hands up participating. What you can't see is that they also have books in their lap. So after they build the words and tap it out, they can immediately write or apply the skill that they've just been taught. And then what I have in the other two pictures is immediately following the instruction on the phonics patterns, our students get the opportunity to apply what they've just learned in little decodable readers. And those are readers that are designed to only have in them things that our students have learned. So they're not trying to just read like any uncontrolled text off of a shelf, which is still something we want our kids to be able to do, but this is for them to immediately apply what they've just been taught. And it's great. So you can see they're all participating. I observed in this classroom for a while, and it was adorable to see all of them helping each other. You can kind of tell from there they've gone through and highlighted just the words first. I'm sure that was a whole class activity, and now they're independently doing what they've been taught. Two of these are from a kindergarten classroom. So our friend with her hands up there is doing Haggerty, which is a phonemic awareness program, and she's telling me how many words are in the sentence. So that's that speech to print. Before I can really, or our teachers can give any instruction on sounds within a word, we need to make sure they hear individual words and then syllables and then the sounds within a word. The second picture, they're going on a scavenger hunt within a decodable reader from our Tier 1 phonics program. and they are looking for words that use the skills they've just been taught. And then the last picture there is from a first grade classroom, and we're using physical manipulatives to practice the tap it, map it, graph it strategy, which is where our students will first tap out the sounds with their teacher that they hear in a basic word. Then they're going to use manipulatives to graph it out, and then they have the opportunity to immediately write it. So it's really engaging. They're active the entire time. And then this is another tool. These are called BLAST foundational kits that we purchased for all of our teachers in the K2 building. And what this does, it kind of works as a jigsaw puzzle. So the teacher will give the students a word. They will find the spelling patterns or sounds from that board and then build it. The color tiles, they're changing a sound at a time so they can identify where they hear the change, then make the change from using the tiles. What's great about this tool is for a lot of our students that still don't have that fine motor skills for writing, it's a big cognitive load to, okay, I'm teaching you how to read, I'm teaching you these patterns, and you have to think about how to physically write a letter and get it down. This allows them to practice the skill that they just learned while removing one layer of the cognitive load so that they can really focus in on the reading pattern. And like I said, you can see all of them are working. Even that small group, they're using little paper tiles to build and make word sorts in a kindergarten classroom. So it's been really fun.
While Alyssa has been instrumental in making this happen in the K3 classrooms, as you can see, this is what we're trying to really grow so every classroom looks like this. She also has to spend time at Winchester Trail getting those 4th and 5th grade teachers up to the expectations of what the structured literacy expectations are for them. So right now she's starting to work with the teachers on morphology instruction. And again, that prefix, the base word, and the suffix, so they realize that each of those component parts has meaning. So when they're learning new words. So that's what she's providing professional development for the teachers on right now. I had mentioned this at the very beginning, that this all falls under Ohio's dyslexia laws. And there's the definition of the dyslexia from the laws. A specific learning disorder that is neurological in origin. And dyslexia is characterized by unexpected difficulties with accurate or fluent word recognition and poor spelling and decoding abilities, not their cognitive abilities. And so when we work with that definition, we then have to put in a screener. And we will start screening our students. 3rd grade goes first. We do that in November. And then we will do 1st and 2nd grade in December. And we're looking for students that are at risk on the screener. We are not diagnosing students with dyslexia. We will send a letter home to parents to let them know fully that our teachers are not doctors. We cannot diagnose. We can only say that they might be at risk of. And the screener is brand new. It's the NWA MAP dyslexia screener, which we already are a district that uses MAP. So these students will have these elaborate headphones that have the microphones that they speak into, and the computer system will score this, and the algorithm we're going to learn tomorrow because the leadership has a training. Yay. But it will let us know if the student is at risk. So what's on your screen now is kind of our timeline. So we will screen the students. We will let the parents know the results of those screenings. We will then provide 6 weeks of intervention. We will progress monitor and send communication home with families to let them know how they're doing every 2 weeks. And then we will administer another and final screener to the student. It can't be the exact same screener. At that point, we will have met the compliance component of the law, and we will let the parents know that we have a structured literacy approach in Canal Winchester schools. That is what will play out. Mrs. Cobb and I are still determining when we will screen those kindergarten students, but it will probably be sometime late winter, early spring at this point. What are the next steps and final steps for us? Well, we've just updated our teaching and learning page to include Ohio's dyslexia laws, so that's fresh. We will continue to train teachers next year in letters. They will receive volume 2 of that training. And then next year, we're only required to train to screen students in kindergarten for dyslexia. This is the only year that we have to do multiple grade levels.
If you are looking for more information, because we just gave you a lot, there is some really good resources on ODE's website. The first is the Ohio Dyslexia Guidebook. It's actually really pretty friendly in terms of vocabulary. You don't have to have an education background or literacy background. And then the Science of Reading information they have too has some really great videos and just some good resources for families and anybody in schools.
A lot of information. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So what percentage of students, well, we don't know, but what percentage of students do we estimate or think will be diagnosed as at risk for dyslexia?
Well, statistically, we know that it's 1 in 4
Okay.
of the general population are likely to have some kind of dyslexic tendencies, but dyslexia is a spectrum. So some kids people, not just children,
Sure.
have coping mechanisms where it might not flag. This is probably only going to flag the students who have like the moderate to more severe.
If a student is identified as being at risk, do we have a requirement or anything that they would need to do to take the next steps? Or do we just put them through the 6 weeks of intervention? Do we ask them to get a further diagnostics from their doctor or no?
Good question.
Yeah.
No, we will be, by law, we're required to provide 6 weeks of intervention. We already have a program in place that we use. We'll continue to, we'll add those students to that intervention during the day. It's going to be a good question if that comes up with, oh, should now I go get my child diagnosed? I think we will have to anticipate that as a possible question. We might put together an FAQ for Mrs. Cobb and the leadership team at Indian Trail on how to respond to those questions. I think because this is brand new, we're not exactly sure what to anticipate, so we'll kind of anticipate all of those questions.
And I would be really surprised if a lot of our students who probably get flagged are probably already getting tier 2 level supports anyway, and the program that we use is structured literacy intervention program. So I think they'll still, it's not like, oh, you've been there for 6 weeks, now you have to exit. They will continue as long as they need the support.
I didn't see the high school staff, like, when are you planning on having it? I know you always got new people coming in, but the teacher training, when are you projecting to be finished with, like, all your different levels of teacher training?
Good question.
That's a great question.
Some of the high school staff will be doing what's called the ODE modules. So there's some more of a streamlined version of the training that some of the intervention teachers at the high school will be taking.
I had a question regarding the tool, the screening tool.
Yes.
I understand that you said the MAP dyslexia screener tool is something new.
Yes.
What was the district using prior to this to screen students, or was there anything in place?
There was nothing in place because there never was a requirement to screen students specifically for dyslexia. So this is all brand new.
Okay.
And in fact, there were only 3 or 4
Yeah.
approved tools for districts to choose in the state of Ohio. So leadership last year was anxiously waiting to see which of the tools would make the most sense, and since we were already a MAP district, we thought for the teacher's sake it would make a lot of sense to go with the tool we already were using.
Okay, and is there some kind of mechanism in place for students who weren't screened, who kind of missed that window, to be identified as a student needing the structured literacy approach?
Great question. Any student in grades 4 through 6 whose parent would like for their child to be screened this year just has to make their teacher and their principal aware of that, and then we'll make Mrs. Locker aware of that, and then she can screen those students.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And if a student were to move in, we have to either make sure they've been screened already, or we would just administer the screener ourselves if we can't prove that.
Okay, very good.
And to clarify, I think the question that Ms. Talley had with maybe not screening for dyslexia, but screening for students to get the additional, like a tier 2 instruction in the reading, is what were we using, and were we screening students to identify those students that would need additional help outside of the regular classroom?
So when a new student comes in, we do our MAP benchmark anyway, and then we usually take a percentile score as a starting place. Any student who scores at this percentile or lower will do additional screeners to see if they need support. Sometimes it can be a fluke, they're not having their best day, but to make sure that is a legitimate score, that they need the actual support. If we get a student who moves in not really close to one of our benchmark times, it's pretty apparent pretty quickly if a student needs help, so we'll then do those additional screeners. They're curriculum based though, so either like the letters phonics screener, sometimes we do the PAST, which is a phonological awareness screener, and then our intervention program has a screener as well, so.
Okay, great, yeah, because it's very important for those students to
Absolutely.
not be left behind.
Oh, yeah. I mean, literacy is critical to life, so we want to make sure our kids have what they need.
Yes. Are there any other comments, questions? Well, thank you both, Craig and Alyssa.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you. Next up, we will be hearing from the Canal Winchester Education Association.
Good. Okay. Hi, I'm Renee Hamilton, math teacher at the high school, representing the CWEA tonight. We have a few things that our members wanted to share with everybody. So our first grade students went to Lynn Fruit Farm for apple picking. And then Beth Henshaw, Alyssa Locker, Janie Cantner, they will be presenting at the Ohio Counselors Conference on positive impact of cultural humanity book studies and mental health discussion groups. In the high school, we have Marina Derringer. Some of you might know her as Marina Rarick. She was a former student at Canal Winchester, graduated, and is now in our history department. So we love to have her joining our staff. So this summer, she was selected as one of the 9 fellows in residence for the Frank C. Munson Institute of American Maritime Studies at Mystic Seaport Museum in Mystic, Connecticut. The fellowship was focused on learning about indigenous and Black paths to freedom via maritime avenues, escape, labor, etc., from various periods of American history, as well as worldly components of those paths to freedom. They heard from many lecturers and scholars in maritime history, African history, indigenous history, and even an underwater archaeologist about collecting history, about telling and interpreting the stories. They took trips to sites such as Newport, Rhode Island, Shelter Island, New York, and others nearby, while working on presentations that they shared with other fellows in a lecture format. Marina used her presentation time to propose a new maritime-centered world history curriculum using both Ohio, Midwestern, and New England states' social studies standards. And then finally, to top it all off, they got to row whale boats down the Mystic River. So that was a really neat opportunity for her. And that's all we have. Okay, thank you.
Very cool. Thank
Yes,
you,
thank you.
Renee. Now we move into our public voice. The board recognizes the value and input received from members of the community. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak before the board today?
We do not this evening.
All right, very good. Next order of business, we will have our executive reports. Up first is our treasurer's report. Mr. Roberts?
Good evening. Ms. Hunt and I will kind of tag team this. You can kind of chime in on the levy planning with the renewal being on the ballot November 7th here in the next couple weeks. We at least wanted to touch base on some questions that have come in, some different things. The property values, reappraisal that's happened in Franklin County, and kind of just lay out an outline and timeline for the district. So some of this is things we covered a few months ago, but wanted to at least touch base on it again. Here's our levy timeline. Gives you the history of the emergency levy, originally passed in 2009. We renewed it for a 3-year cycle in 2011, and then the first 5-year cycle happened in 14, and then we renewed it in 19. And now we're looking to do another 5-year renewal of the emergency levy. In 2029, right now our plan is to maybe make that a 10-year emergency renewal cycle, and then follow that up with 10-year cycles after that. But for this year, we're maintaining the 5-year cycle. Here's some key things that you need to know. It's a renewal of an existing tax, so no new tax, helps maintain a balanced operating budget, and it retains the 12.5% state and homestead and rollback credits that are provided by the state of Ohio. If it would not be renewed, here's how it impacts our cash position report. You can see in 2027, it's about $18 million less without the renewal. So the balance begins to drop pretty drastically because expenditures would exceed revenues starting in fiscal 2025. What's the cost to taxpayers? This is just kind of a table that shows you the breakdown with the 12.5% credits. In 19, when I looked at this slide, our median appraised home value was $165,000. So over the last 5 years, that has increased $40,000 for the median home value. So I won't even look at these top two. This is more to help you with your math, but we're probably looking more at the $200,000 home. The annual cost of that levy is $552. So currently, we're projected to be at 9.01 mils on the emergency levy. When it was originally passed in 2009, it was 14.9 mils. So it has decreased almost 6 mils since the original passage due to property value increases. With this being a fixed sum levy, as property values increase, the millage drops, so you do not pay any additional taxes on that property value. So it's actually a perfect levy to have in times of inflation in the economy, so you're guaranteed not to pay any additional money on this levy. I just want to look at the property tax values. These cycles are determined by Ohio law, and there is a schedule out on the Department of Taxation that shows you when these counties are up for reappraisal and up for updates. Obviously, Franklin County is in the reappraisal year. Oh, sorry. And then we just went through an update last year in Fairfield County. You can see we went from 622 to 667 thanks to the Fairfield County update, and now we're projecting to go from 667 million to 771 million due to the Franklin County reappraisal. And you can kind of see it from there on the projections based on this table of schedules on updates and reappraisals. This slide kind of illustrates, I want to kind of pump the brakes. There's legislation out there right now that's trying to change the reappraisal process, the update process. We, as treasurers and school districts and local entities, are pushing back against anything because you've got to almost just let the market be the market, and it will update itself. So if you look at this 7-year period, we averaged 9.41% in values increasing for property. Had we done something at that point, or legislation done something, we didn't know that a recession was coming in 2008, 2009, to where our values were suppressed for the next 9 years. So we lost 0.22% for the following 9 years on average, with one big one at 7.99 in 2011. Since then, it's almost an exact duplicate of this 7 years. This 7-year cycle has seen 9.89%. This shows you our revenue growth off of that. So although we're projecting 16.96% value increase, the school district's revenue is increasing by 4.62%. So it's not a direct correlation when you see property values go up that you receive that revenue. There's reduction factors, there's fixed sum levies that are in place, there's the 20 mil floor, there's a lot of other factors that are in place that kind of suppress your revenue growth outside of these values. So just because your value goes up doesn't mean one, you're paying more on your tax bill, and two, that the school district or other local entities are receiving more because of the increase of property values. Just quickly a breakdown on class one, so residential and agricultural. 35% of our values are in Fairfield County, 65% are in Franklin County. So property values are just one piece of the equation on your tax bill. The other piece of that equation is tax rates. So you would take your property value times your tax rate, and that would essentially get you what you owe on your tax bill. You can see the history of our tax rates. In 2015, we were 51.18. We have since dropped to 39.69, with projection in 2023, thanks to the appraised values, of dropping to 37.34. And then you can kind of see the projections based on property values. After that, we've got some bond levies falling off from 27 to 28, so that's why you see a bigger decrease there. And then we've got the rest of our bonds falling off in 33, so you'll see another big decline there. So we have continuously seen drops throughout the history in the last decade. We will continue to see that over the time as property values increase. And I just wanted to kind of throw this one in there to show you the emergency levy and how it's going to continue to kind of taper down as property values also increase through time. Remember that I said it was initially passed for 14.9 in 2009. So by the time we get to 2029, 20 years later, it's almost cut in half from what it was originally passed for. Some questions that I've been receiving lately have to do with abatements. So instead of doing slides, I just kind of wanted to pop up this Department of Development website. To be abated, you've got to be a part of the Ohio Community Reinvestment Area Program, and that's all administered by the cities and counties. So the school districts really have nothing to do with abatements. The only thing that school districts have is pre-July 1, 1994, any abatement had to be 100%. Since then, they changed the law and said it can be up to 100%, and anything that's abated over 50% has to be approved by the Board of Education. So in 8 years that I have been here, we have had 2 CRA properties come to the board to where they've asked for approval, that being the city. The other CRA areas were in place before July 1, 1994. That includes the area where Brewdog is located. The Board of Education did not have to approve anything to do with that area. It was already zoned as CRA, and it was prior to this 1994 law change. So, just some stats on abatements. Franklin County, right now we have $55.5 million of assessed value abated. That's 26 parcels, results in $2.5 million in abated school taxes. 2 residential parcels totaling $62,200 are abated. Both of those are on Waterloo Street. If you look on the city's website, that is a pre-1994 abated area. It's just a small area, residential area on Waterloo. To my knowledge, it's the only residential CRA area in this school district. Fairfield County, $23.1 million of assessed, makes up 15 parcels and $581,000 in school abated taxes with 0 residential parcels. This slide I wanted to throw in, it kind of surprised me. So with all of those things, value increases, tax rate increases, it doesn't always mean your tax bill is going to be higher. So if you look at what the median home value was in 2019 and your taxable value, and you take it by the effective millage that was in place at the time, your tax bill would have been $24.94. In 2023, with the new appraised value and the lesser effective millage rates, you're actually paying less in taxes, even though property values have went up because of the millage drop.
So, go back to that slide real quick. So,
Sorry. So the 12.5% state tax credits, does that apply to any levy that is passed in the district? What does that apply to?
No, it's applied to any levy pre-November 2013. Since this was originally passed in 2009, the 12.5 tax credits apply. Any levy passed after that date, which we don't have any, would not receive that 12.5% credit. So every levy that we have on our books has the 12.5% levy. Anything new that we would pass, we would forfeit that 12.5%. So it's essentially, it's a discount for our taxpayers.
So because this is a renewal, basically it goes back to when we originally passed it in 2009 and we get that
Correct.
credit for it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
but potentially, if it were not to pass, and we would lose that, so that wouldn't be back on the table. So it's important that if we can keep the renewal, we'll continue to get that 12.5% credit from the state.
Correct. Yeah, that's definitely one of the key factors in renewing the levy. And then finish up just to show the timeline again on what our plans are. 5-year renewal this year, and then looking at a 10-year renewal possibly in 2029, but things could change by then. But right now, that's the timeline and that's the plan that we're operating on. You have anything that you'd like to add?
I think when I hear the information, the main points that I just take in is, number one, that the levy that we have on is a renewal levy. So, you know, and the 12.5% is an amount of money that we are getting that we would not get without that renewal. And then the second is the two things kind of bother me, but the substitute levy that we have, that allows us to collect with the millage dropping. So you're paying for the same amount over the homes that are there, which is why that percentage drops for the millage. But then any new construction that would come in from the time you pass it, like when the levy starts to collect, actually is money that we would get in addition to the millage that was. So that way, that new money the new construction then helps us to offset the cost of, you know, enrollment that may come in, those type of things. The other thing, again, is just the language on the ballot. That is something that I struggle with because it does not say renewal. So it is hard to understand if you aren't, you know, talking and we don't know what that means when you're reading it. There is nothing in the ballot language that actually will say that it's a renewal. So I think that is just, those 3 points are just 3 points that I think are important when we talk with the renewal levy.
Are we allowed to put anything out that explains that it's a renewal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got things out there.
So we've been, you know, communicating information. That is one thing that we are not allowed to have any opinion on, you know, or sharing that opinion with anybody. We're not allowed to have any, we need to remain neutral is basically what we have. So we have been putting out information with that language. On our website, we do have a webpage specific to the levy, the renewal levy, that has frequently asked questions and information on there. So.
Just want to highlight, these all are fixed sum levies. Oops. From the 10.19 to the 5.42. So as property values increase, every one of those millage rates decrease. So you cannot collect additional taxes on those levies. So a big chunk of our levies are fixed sum, which is a good thing in the district. As we talked about, the bonds are falling off, so we do have a plan in place to keep letting our millage rates decline. And then we'll explore, once we get out to 2029, what needs are at that point in time There's so many factors with state revenue, other local funding and different things that will determine the path that we go moving forward. But you can see the descending blow of our tax rates. And that's been our goal the whole time, is to let those continually decline, keep the existing levy. That way we can be proactive, we can properly plan, we know what the budgets are, and we're not constantly fighting for new levies. So as long as we've got these things, we can continue to properly plan. I mean, just over the last 5 years, we've added 45,000 square foot to the high school in classroom space with no extra tax dollars. We're adding 30,000 square feet to the elementary building to offer full-day kindergarten with no additional tax money. We're looking at other options, including performing arts centers and things like that, that are not going to require additional tax money. So I feel like we're doing the things necessary and doing the things in our community that they want, and just aren't in salaries and things that you can't always see, but it's intangible assets that the district owns and the community can benefit from.
For me, I know you have spoken about all of the advantages of supporting the renewal levy. However, how do you get folks to understand that even though this has been renewed prior and it's been in effect since 2009, how do you reconcile the thought from the community that, well, this is giving the appearance of a permanent levy because it keeps coming back up? How do you address that as far as explaining, because it has such longevity and we keep renewing it? How do you speak to that? Because even though it's not like a permanent levy, it's given the impression sometimes to folks that it is.
Can I touch on that just a little bit?
Yep.
So, as I look at it, it appears to me we could go one of two ways with it, right? We could say, hey, we need this money, and we're going to go to we're going to go to our constituents and we're going to ask for a renewal. And by asking for that renewal, we're taking advantage of the 12.5% state credits that are there. Whereas if we didn't do renewal and said, okay, let's just put a new continuing levy on the ballot, then we lose that credit. And so by doing it that way, we would actually, the district parents, the district homeowners would actually end up paying more, even if it was, if it was the same millage and we got the same as the school district, the homeowners would actually pay more because they wouldn't get that 12.5% state tax credit back. So yeah, I agree with you. It does seem like it's permanent, and maybe in a way it is, because we're probably going to ask for a renewal. But as long as we're continuing to renew that one that we originally passed in 2009, we're able to take advantage of that state match, 12.5%. It's not a match, but that state credit.
So that seems to be like the big bonus there, is that 12.5% credit.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, let's say we didn't renew this. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we would need something. So by the time we were to do that, let's say we do it in 2026. Well, that rate would be down to 8.47 mils. So you'd have to recover the 12.5% that you lost from the state. You'd also have to recover all of the lost dollars from 24 to 26 or 27, wherever you had, because expenditures are going to exceed revenues. If this money were to go away, you're going to deficit spend pretty much immediately when it expires. So then you are playing catch up. You're reacting and not being proactive. This allows us to be proactive. We know exactly what it's going to do. It's going to continue to decline. Since I've been here in 2016, anyone that I've spoken to have been consistent that this is not going away. This is not a temporary levy. It is a permanent levy that we can do in 5, 10, or continuous cycles. We do not want to do a continuous cycle because we have heard that people like the checks and balances in this community. So the 5-year and the 10-year checks seems to be the way to go. One, that holds us accountable. We've got to do the right thing with the money as an entity. If not, people are going to see that and they're not going to vote yes for it. But if they do see that we're doing the right things with the money by building infrastructure, taking care of the people that work in this school district, then I think they will support it and continue to support it as we go. I think the messaging has to be it's not a temporary levy, but it's the checks and balances that hold us in place. And it also allows us to be proactive by knowing exactly how this money is going to react and that we can plan for it. It's part of the problem with the state budget. It's a biennium budget. Every 2 years, they're looking to change the formula, adapt the formula. It makes it very hard to plan for the state revenue side, which makes up more than 48% of our budget. So could you imagine if we're doing the same thing with this? So we'd have 70% of our budget that we don't know what's going to happen with it. So it makes it very difficult to plan into the future without having some knowns. So those are the big factors for me. Because, yeah, I guess theoretically you could let it expire, let the balances go down, but then you're really just reacting and chasing after that. I mean, you're never going to recover what you lost, and it's going to cost taxpayers greater amount of money than it would have had we just kept it and maintained it through the time. Like we show, I think the data shows, I mean, when you approved it at 14.9, by the time you get to this renewal, it's 8.9. That's 6 full mills that has dropped. That's $6 per $1,000 that has declined as those things went up. If it was a fixed rate, we're probably not having that same conversation because a fixed rate would keep generating dollars. But a fixed sum, I think, is perfect in an inflationary community and an inflationary environment. So I think the fixed sum is really perfect for taxpayers. It's perfect for us. We know exactly what it's going to bring, and then taxpayers know that they don't have to pay anything additional when their property value goes up. So it's really a win-win.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And I think we as board members, it's important for us to get out there in the community and just be able to tell them the facts. And, you know, I think the key is that we would be able to stay proactive in our planning to enhance all the educational opportunities for the students in our district. So it's very important. And Mrs. Hunt, did you have anything additional for your report?
Not for my report. Can you go back to the last slide that you had where you show our plan, this one here? Yeah, so just when I look at this, our 2009 will be 20 years without asking for new money, which I think is pretty strong. And even in this, then you look at in 2029, we have that we would like to do a 10-year, which here would say in 2034, that would be to levy new taxes. We don't believe, like, the only reason we would need to do that right now is if there would be a new building that we would have to build, or we have a huge growth in enrollment. So even then, with the 10-year, we are looking at potentially then going 30 years out to where we didn't have to ask for new money if we kept the buildings, you know, our growth where we're at, where we are able to control it a little bit. And so that I just want to make note of that. The levying of the new taxes that you see in 2034 would be mainly because we would need for growth with new buildings, which would then mean additional students.
I mean, if you could predict the future, I mean, you'd be
Right.
doing really well. I mean, no one would have come off this 7-year period right here and then expected this in the next 9. I mean, there's no way you could have seen that coming. I mean, just like right now, there's no way that you can look at it, but statistically, data shows you that a recession is going to happen at some point. It's just the way it is. Markets correct all the time. A stock can't continuously just pump. It has to regress and it has to correct itself in the market. And the housing market will do that. And it will correct itself on its own. And hopefully we don't see a repeat of this 9-year period. But I wouldn't continuously expect 17%, 10%, 16% to happen. It's not realistic long term.
So you like talking mills. I understand dollars and budgets, right? You get budgets, but I don't get mills necessarily. So let's just say, I mean, just as an exercise, because the residents in the district have helped us keep our budget balanced for the last now almost, 15 years now because of this levy. So just as a practice exercise, let's say the levy goes away at the end of this school year. How bad is our deficit without that levy? Dollars. How bad is it dollars without that?
$4 million in the first year, it's gone.
Okay.
10 million in the second year, it's gone. 18 million cumulative in the third year, it's gone. You can kind of do the math from there. That as the longer you go out, the more that's going to deficit spend.
Yep.
Yep. So.
And one other thing I wanted to highlight, on top of obviously not having to go out for a tax for 20 years, we brought in the permanent improvement fund, and we've done some other things to make sure that we kept off the ballot asking for new money. So I think as we go forward, and definitely like our board president today, Mrs. Talley, is talking about, is that we got to go out and be proactive and share our story with the community, because as you look at what we're doing here, not many other school districts can go out and continue to build and add. Obviously, we're bringing in kindergarten, we're adding to our buildings and not have to ask for any new tax money, and that's very unique in Central Ohio. So it's really important that we look at the new this tax levy. Again, we can't say it's a renewal, but it really is a no tax. We're not raising taxes on our community, and we're really planning for the future on top of it. So this levy, on top of getting us through this period, if you look at our long-term plan, if you look at Mr. Roberts, we got over a decade we're looking at long-term and not having to ask for new money. So it's really important that we share that with our community. So I know, as Mrs. Talley was saying, that's really important. So I think it's important that we share that story with our taxpayers in the next few weeks before we get to the general election.
Absolutely. And I would also encourage residents, if they have any questions or concerns, to reach out to the district, and the district will be more than happy to discuss the situation, your concern, and answer those questions that you may have.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
All right. Into district reports. Does anyone from the board have anything to highlight or address out of the district reports?
So I do, I'm sorry. So with as we go to full-day kindergarten, if I remember correctly, we're also going to be moving pre-K into that building, correct? So does anybody know, or can somebody tell me? I'm assuming we're starting all of the planning for the logistics of doing all that moving. Can you kind of bring me up to speed with that?
Sure. So Ms. Cobb shook her head no. But we began having conversations with our kindergarten staff on the professional development day, I believe, to where we're starting to really look at what instruction will look like, what the day will look like. Mr. Lautenschlager is working alongside Ms. Cobb as well, Ms. Anderson, to talk what that's going to look like. So we are having the discussions, but we are really diving in now on how that will look. We did meet, calendar isn't on because of us making sure that we want to have a start date that is accurate with the construction project, but we're looking at that August 18th week-ish, somewhere in there, to start, which will give us plenty of time, knock on wood, but with planning over the next 6 months on getting the students over. We do know where they will be in the wing. Any concerns, teachers are working with Ms. Cobb and Mr. Lautenschlager to make sure that they're bringing the concerns to them on things that we may not have thought of or the construction team hasn't thought of. But yes, we are looking forward to it, looking forward to the discussions. And it is a big job. When you look at the number of kids that we're going to be increasing, not only going from them being half day to full day, but also the birth rates that are up for next year's kindergarten class, there will be quite a bit more students in that building.
Yeah, we have 212 kindergartners right now, so 106, give or take, each session. We're gonna have close to 300 next year in the building at all times. So it's gonna be quite a bit of an adjustment, I think. I know curriculum's working on all the different resources. That brings additional textbooks for all those different sections. The resources that they have accumulated with time in their current kindergarten classes is going to need to be quickly accumulated into those classrooms that are kind of outside your textbooks and your normal resources, toys and different things like that. So I think everybody's formulating a plan on how to handle that.
And tying into what does related arts look like? What does music look like? What does PE look like? Is it the same as our first and second graders, or does it look different? Do we push into the classroom? Those are all discussions that we are beginning as we speak. Teams are going out to visit other full-day kindergarten districts who offer it to see what they're doing, get feedback, so that we can build what will be best for us here at Canal Winchester.
The amount of the increase in kids, do we know if that's increase in parents new to our district, or are those, what the difference is between existing parents and new parents? Do we have any idea of that?
I don't have any of that data. What I do know is our birth rates are in the 250 range, which is the highest we've had in a decade. We have been below 215 or right around there for the last decade, and typically that will bring at least 100%, and it's went all the way up to 113% of that birth rate. Hardly ever is it below 100%. So we can guarantee ourselves at least the 250 something. We lose, or we add about 40 per year from K to 1, so that tells me that 40 of our kids are choosing not to come to kindergarten at Canal Winchester and then coming back in first grade. But then we also pick up 12 to 15 in second grade, third grade, fourth grade. So I think they slowly trickle back. So I think a safe estimate of 300 for the first year of full-day kindergarten is probably safe, and that's just based on families in the district. So that's the 250 birth rate, and then that's the 40 kids that we're expecting not to leave. That's an annual trend, 10 years of data that shows that we range from 30 to 50, 55 that come back in first grade. So we feel pretty comfortable that we're going to be close to 300 full-day kindergartners. I think that will pick up because we showed data this year. In transition years, all of those grade levels were up. So you can almost assume that you're going to pick up some families if your surrounding area does not have full-day kindergarten, and it comes down to that choice of where you're buying a house or building a house. I think most people would prefer full-day kindergarten, so I think it's going to bring different things that we don't even know, but we're going to have 2 or 3 years of new trend data to be able to establish what that's going to do to enrollment moving through the other grade levels.
2 more questions. Do we have, or are we notifying the parents that we know would be coming here that it's all-day kindergarten and not half-day now? Is there any notifications going to
Yeah,
them?
I mean, we've been communicating with, that question's a little bit tough because we don't have the information on, right? But in our newsletters and communication, we're trying to get the word out as much as we can in the community so that everyone knows. And we'll continue to work with those who would have access to students before they get to us.
So that said, our daycares in our area, it's been a probably pretty big business for them to have kids half of the day because now the kids are going to be in school all day. Are we working with them or notifying them? Because they're probably going to be the ones to know that all these kids won't be here all day next year. We're used to having them, at least half the day, and now they're going to be in school all day.
are we working with them, or is there any communication to the daycares in the area where the kids are being bused to or picked up from, half-day, kindergarten, currently, that there's going to be a change next year?
We will work on that. I will say one thing in the community is a lack of childcare. Right now, especially we had one closed down that has always, across the street, I believe, that no longer will have their daycare. So that is something we will communicate, but I do believe it will be probably an advantage for the majority.
I was
We'll
just thinking
definitely
it
get that.
might be a disadvantage for the daycares because they're only going to have the kids either before school or before and after school and not during the day. So I just kind of wondered if they would be able to still maintain and fill that gap that we have of after school to assist more parents with where their kids are going to go after school.
I think if anything, what time do they start in the morning?
9:30 Indian Trail.
If anything, you're gonna have an influx of kids in the morning and maybe pick up from those locations.
Yeah.
Which you already maybe have now. Because I know when my kid was in kindergarten, the daycare that they went, that's what a lot of parents did. They dropped off the kids in the morning because you could drop them off at 6, and then the bus picked them up from there to take them to kindergarten. So I could definitely see that being a thing. But I don't know how it's going to impact daycares.
And maybe more of our younger kids will be able to have access to it because it frees up time, I'm not sure. But we'll make sure to communicate that with them.
And did you have anything else? Okay. I did have something from the district report. It's regarding the middle school. I see that the middle school received a grant from the state for a math tutoring program. I was wondering if someone could speak more about that math tutoring program.
I believe Miss Fink is on her way up.
Is that the middle school?
Yeah.
Yes, that was on the teaching and learning report. So over the summer, it was a pretty quick pretty quick turnaround, but the Ohio Department of Education received funds, and I don't have my notes in front of me to kind of refer back to, but offering across the state high dosage tutoring in math or ELA, and after conferring with Mr. Moore at the middle school, looking at our Ohio State test results, we were just looking for some things and more opportunities that we could provide for our kids for some additional math help. So one of the reasons I think we did receive it was that we were able to offer it during the day because we have a math expansion course that we've already identified as a intervention period in the day with Ms. Frassini. So we, one of the vendors that had been approved by the state is Huntington Learning Center, and just where their location is compared to Canal, I think that was one of the reasons we were able to receive the grant. So we have not started the tutoring yet. I have another meeting with them this week, so we're really just now working out the details.
So will it be first come, first serve, and it's free to the families?
It is. It'll be during the day, but we are basically using our test scores and things to identify those students. So based on their map, their Ohio State test results. And then they will come in and they will issue a diagnostic. Also, they will, I believe, use the STAR math assessment, and then they will have lessons and interventions based on those results.
Okay, and I understand there's about 30 spots open.
Yes, 30 is what we received. We're really going to concentrate on mostly 6th grade and 7th grade, I believe. And a lot of it is just logistics of how we can make it work in the schedule to have somebody there at least 3 times a week. And they'll get, I think the way the state worked it out with high dosage tutoring, the requirement is that they have at least 3 30-minute sessions each week. So the way I think the schedule is going to work out is they'll be there for 2 periods a day, or 2 periods a week, which would be like 42 minutes for the students. So we'll definitely be able to meet that benchmark of 3 30-minute sessions. We'll just do it in 2 days, though.
Okay, so if a student is identified as needing that tutoring, the school will send some kind of notification out to the family?
We already did.
Okay.
So we are still saying that they're potentially, if they would like to receive the additional help, yes.
Okay.
But again, we're still kind of, they're working, I think these vendors and stuff were chosen, and then it's been, like I said, it was a very quick turnaround to get the program in place and for them to identify the tutors to come to the district as well. So.
And it's only open for sixth graders?
Well, it's for the middle school, but we have identified based on the schedule and what we think the need is, it's going to be the sixth graders and then also a small group of seventh graders as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that our own John Paul Hoffman received a specialized certification credential as a certified education technology leader. So congratulations, JP, and that's so amazing.
JP's back in the office.
And did anyone have anything else under district report? Next, we will be moving on to our consent agenda. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Mr. Butler and Mr. George.
Thank you. We're going to start off first with number one, our minutes from our September 18th regular meeting. Number two, we do have donations. We have 3 donations this month. One is from the Brock Strong Foundation to Canal Winchester Middle School, and that is to support an author visit for the entire building, I believe. We have an anonymous donation to food service, and we have a donation from 3D Pathways LLC to the high school 9 tribe. So we want to thank those individuals for their donations. Number 3 is our classified personnel. We do have a couple resignations. And you'll notice that we are approving 3 new classified staff, and I'm excited to see 2 bus drivers that we are approving this month. So hopefully we'll keep those numbers up. Also, we have a substitute bus custodian that we're approving. Moving on to number 4, our certified personnel, we do have a resignation for the purpose of retirement from Regina Kills, and she is a middle school intervention specialist, and if you notice, she will be retiring in September of next year. So we will work with her. We will replace the position. She will work with us in whether it's training or for August, helping us sub, covering classes, whatnot, for her to reach that September 1st date for retirement. And we also have a request for a leave of absence from our speech language pathologist. Number 5 is our supplemental personnel. You will notice that there are several athletic supplementals and our volunteers for the winter season. And that is all that I have for the consent agenda tonight.
Are there any questions or comments regarding the consent agenda? Hearing none. Mr. Roberts, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mrs. Talley?
Yes. Motion carries 4-0. Next up, we have our first action item. It's a resolution designating authorized representative to make project decisions. I need a motion, please.
I'll move.
Second.
So this is authorizing myself and Ms. Hunt to make decisions as far as change orders on the Indian Trail Elementary project within the scope of the budget. I wanted to do this so it made sense. So the $11.1 million has been brought in through GMPs. We approved GMP 1, GMP 2, GMP 3. This money here was brought in through an architect contract. So we had no buffer other than the CMR contingency, and the CMR is responsible for using that contingency, and that main amount that they use it for is to stay on schedule, or if there's winter conditions to where they've got to accelerate the schedule. If they do not use this, then it does come back to the project. So working with legal, we decided to do, and this is typical on a project, to do a 4% owner's contingency. So that way, if there's any change orders that happen, which we had some on the civil work to do fire lanes and different things, then we could get that done without having to bring the direct change order to the board for approval. So essentially, as long as we don't go over the $12.6 million, we can kind of work within the boundaries of the project, allow the change orders to happen. Now, keep in mind, those change orders are going through an exhaustive process of architect review, owner's agent review, my review, maintenance director review. So those change orders are definitely being vetted, but at least gives us a little flexibility on the project. With the schedule being tight, we didn't want to have to hold off on something and be waiting. And then we didn't want our subcontractors to be waiting. It doesn't look good when they're a month or two kind of past what they have done for work and still waiting on payment. So it kind of speeds up that whole process a little bit. Any questions on this? So this is kind of what we're operating off of on the budget. With these two contingencies, we feel like we're probably in a pretty good spot budget-wise. Once we get through the civil work and they start going up in the air, the risks are more limited. The knowns are out there, so the change orders should be less. Most of your change orders come through during the civil process when they're moving dirt and those types of things with the foundation. The retention pond was a kind of an issue. The fire lane was an issue. So those are all things that we were asked to add and modify through the city's review of our plan documents. So most of everything else is reviewed, and unless we make changes, for example, if you change from mulch to a poured-in-place rubber, then we could maybe use some of these contingencies later to make those playground surfaces a little nicer, but it kind of comes down to where the budget is and what contingency we have left to be able to do some of those little extra things that might make the project better.
So kind of outside the scope of this a little bit, but you mentioned the permitting. Have we gotten through that piece of it pretty much?
I'm not sure.
We have not. So I talked with Lucas Hare on Monday of last week because we're really up against the end of this week is when we need to start going above the 4 feet, and we're waiting for our civil permit that's being reviewed. On last Monday, he told me that they had 2 small projects in front, or 2 small permits in front, and he did not have any reason to believe we would go past Friday. And we called today, and we still do not have it. So I'm going to make a call again we just heard that this afternoon, so I'll make a call again to see where we're at, to see if we can't get that approved and moving so that we can begin to really get into the project. That's really,
Yeah.
we can't have that slow us down.
Right,
That puts us way behind.
we're on a tight
Yes, we
timeline
are.
anyway, so, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
without that, they could only go up to 4 feet on the wall. They technically have gotten permission to go higher, but an inspection would have to happen, so they don't want to go any higher, and then the inspection would come back and say whatever that might be, and then they've got to remove back down to 4 feet of wall. So we really need that permit.
All right, if there are no other comments, Mr. Roberts, would you please call the roll?
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mrs. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. The next action item would be additional payment in lieu of transportation. And I know this is pretty routine. I'll move to approve the resolution for additional 2023-2024 payment in lieu of transportation requests. Is there a second?
It.
Nothing further?
If there are no questions or comments, Mr. Roberts, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. And Our third item is policy for the final reading. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we had our first reading of the policy at the September 2023 board meeting. We did not have any changes, so just bringing it back to you all for the final approval.
All right, if there are no questions or comments, Mr. Roberts, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mrs. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
And the motion passes 4-0. Do we have a need for executive session?
We do not.
All right. I also, before we conclude, I wanted to just congratulate our football team, 9-0. Thank you for the athletic team, the athletic director, for your leadership. And I also wanted to recognize our Kasim Wade, who is the OSU Wexner Medical Center High School Athlete of the Week. Great job. You all make us proud. So if there are no further comments, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Butler and Mr. George. Mr. Roberts, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. George? Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mrs. Talley?
Yes. Motion carries 4-0. And this concludes our regular school board meeting, and we hope you have a great evening, continuing empowering all of our students for success.